Welcome to Faith and Calm. This is part 107. And this week, we're going to sort of continue a little bit of what we talked about last week. I mean, we're trying to bring things down, make it very practical. We're learning Pirkei Avos, ethics of our fathers, and how to apply, these deeper lessons to very practical day-to-day issues that we have in our lives, and hopefully this will get there. So I called the title. My wife actually agreed with the title, Sweet Revenge. I realize it's a strange title, and I'm really surprised anybody decided to come. But it's based on this week's Parsha, Kadoshim to you. You should be holy. And of course, if you say, what, me, holy? And the answer is yes, you can be holy. You can be very holy. So holy means that you're not only, it doesn't mean, holy does not mean what some people think, that, to be holy, you have to somehow separate yourself from the whole world, live on a mountaintop or sit in a room in Bnei Brak and learn all day long. The real idea of holiness is when you actually are able to integrate it and bring it down into the day-to-day things in this world. So that's the paradox, is very much about very mundane shopping and cleaning and other tasks and so forth, and being holy even in doing that. That is where real holiness is found. So let's try and bring holiness down into the idea of vengeance and grudges and anger and other kinds of situations that we have. And because this happens. People do things, they hurt us. I have to start with the story. So the story goes as follows. Probably everybody has heard of Simon Wiesenthal. He was a famous Nazi hunter, and he was also a Holocaust survivor. And right after the war, he was in one of these DP, displaced placement camps in Germany. And there happened to be another Jew there. And this Jew asked him for a favor. Could I borrow $10 from you? $10 in 1945 was a lot of money. And especially in a DP camp. But Simon Wiesenthal had, and this guy said, "Hey, I'll be able to get it. I have a package coming within a week. You'll have the money back." So he gave him the $10. Came the end of the week. The guy said, "Oh, there's a problem with the mail. I'm sorry. I don't have it yet." Next week, the next week. The story just kept going on for like 6 months. And after 6 months, the guy came to Simon Wiesenthal and told him, "I just got a package. And I'm leaving the country. I got a visa to Canada. And so here's their $10 back. And thank you so much." And Simon Wiesenthal told him, he said, "I don't want the $10 anymore." He says, "It's not worth it. I'd rather keep my opinion of you." So, that's holding a grudge. That is holding a grudge. So he's a good person. But anyway, what is this idea of holding a grudge? So in 2 lines in this week's Parsha, there's a huge insight in explanation of this whole idea of what does it mean to be upset with somebody and to grudge, very practical. And the light starts out, the line in the Chumash says, Al tisna achicha belovcha, don't hate your fellow man, your brother, literally, or your sister, in your heart, yeah. Ocha tichacha et amitecha, you shall certainly rebuke your somebody who's done something wrong. Which, what's the connection between the first and the second? And it seems like that's not going together. And then al tisalach alav chet, you should not cause him to sin. And then it says, lo tikaneh v'lo titor, don't take vengeance and don't hold a grudge. You should love your fellow Jew as yourself. I am Hashem. Okay. So let's look at one line here. There's something interesting that goes on. What is this idea? What is it to mean to hold a vengeance, and what is a grudge? What's the difference between the two, and why do we care? So Rashi, the classic commentator on the Chumash, says, okay, I'll give you an example. You'll understand it. Well, he says, for example, there's one guy, let's call him Reuven, and there's another guy named Shimon. Reuven comes over to Shimon and says, "Can I borrow your sickle?" What a sickle is, Those of you from Russia know what a sickle is, because you saw the hammer and sickle. It's that big scythe that you do for the weeds, and it's got this big curve, and and you cut, and you swing it. was very important in those days because literally, if you didn't have one, you had no wheat, you had no bread. Everybody had to have a sickle. So, you ask, I said, please, could I borrow your sickle for, the day? It's not going to get hurt. So the first second guy says, Shimon says to him, no, I'm not giving it to you. Whatever. The next day, Shimon, the guy who was asked, turns back to Reuben and says, hey, I need an axe. Can I borrow your axe? So Reuben tells him, no, I'm not giving you my axe. You didn't give me your sickle. I'm not giving you my axe. That, Rashi says, is a classic case of vengeance. That's vengeance. What is the case of grudge? A little different. Case of a grudge works as follows. Reuven asks Shimon for an axe, and Shimon says no. The next day, Shimon goes and asks for a sickle from Reuven, and Reuven says, of course you can have it. I'm not a person like you. I give out things. Here, take it. Take the sickle and go. That, he's holding a grudge. You can see he's holding a grudge. He has to tell him, I'm not like you. Two famous commentators from the 12th and the 13th century asked questions about this. And they said, there's something that doesn't quite roll off. There's something strange about the way Rashi explains it here. You see what the difference is? There's a difference between the two stories. There's a subtle switch that doesn't seem to need to be there. It's a detail, but it's a detail that tells you everything. It tells you an awful lot. What is the detail? Okay, I'll fill it in for you. The first time the guy asked for a sickle, and the second guy asked for an axe. The other case, it's an axe and then a sickle. Now you might say, who cares? The message is across. Who cares what was the order in the two cases? First the sickle, then an axe, then an axe and a sickle. It's the same thing. You ask for my car, you ask for my cell phone, whatever it is, and so forth. But these commentators said that Rashi doesn't do anything for fun. He's getting from Torah's Kohanim, which is a commentary from the time of the Gemara on Parshas Vayikra. And so the change is actually a big explanation about our psychology, who we are, and our feelings about other people. What's the difference? Before we get to that, let's just try and look at another thing about the story, which you might have noticed. When somebody asks you to borrow something, and you say no, have you done an avera? Are you not moral? You made a mistake? No. Nowhere in Chumash, nowhere in the code of Jewish law does it ever say you have to buy. Somebody asks you to borrow something, you have to give. Okay, somebody's poor, he asks for tzedakah, that's a different story. But here, we're not saying that these guys are poor, he's needy or something like that, you're just saying, to borrow. The second guy, the one who's holding a vengeance or for grudges, he's called the bad guy. Why? Doesn't seem fair. If I ask you for something and you refuse me, and I say, okay, fine, I'm going to be just like you. You ask for something from me, I'll pay you back in kind. I won't give it back to you. Is that so terrible that the Chumash has to say, no, this is wrong, don't do it, it's a bad thing, it's an avera? What's the logic? It's not fair. It's not balanced, right? There's something wrong here. See, I asked you, I should be able to, and you didn't want, so I should be able to tell you back the same thing, right? That's, what goes around goes around. You're stingy. I'll be back to you like that. No. Torah says that's bad. So why are we saying this? What are we doing? What's wrong here? So if you pay attention, maybe you can see that there's a difference. When the first person asks for something, the second guy, like I said, it's not necessarily, he doesn't have to, there could be a lot of reasons going on in this person's head why they're saying no. Maybe he's afraid that I will damage it. I need it. I need it later in the day. I know you. You're a klutz. You're a schlemazel. You're going to destroy it. You can say no to somebody like that. You have to set boundaries. You don't have to necessarily just be a giver all the time to somebody else. Or maybe I need it back in an hour. I don't have to explain every reason why I'm not loaning it to you. Or maybe I come from a family and we just happen to be not so giving. We're careful about our stuff and so forth. And we don't, we like to have it back exactly the way we want it and so forth and put back where we want it. And so, maybe in my family, some people's families are completely opposite, but, that's not my fault. I grew up in a family, a context, an environment. And I'm allowed to say no if and maybe I have to improve myself and maybe I have to be more giving and more generous. Okay. But there's no reason for the other person to try and get into that second person's head, for Shimon to get into Reuben's head and to start making judgments about him. What business do you have in making judgments and saying, okay, I think you're a bad person, so I'm going to take vengeance on you. I'm going to hold a grudge against you. That's the problem that the Torah is telling it about. Don't go there. It's not a place where you're supposed to be thinking. People have reasons why, or good or bad, why they don't necessarily behave so generously. It's not our business to start thinking about why are they not behaving the way I think that they're supposed to behave. It's not our business. It's not where is I know I'm crossing a border there. I'm thinking about, how I think he should behave. It's not right. And that's what the Torah is telling you. Don't go take vengeance on him. Don't tell him, no, I'm not going to be like you, because you're assuming that you know his whole story, and you don't know his whole story or her whole story. You just don't know it. And you don't just start telling him, I'm not going to be like you, because it's not doing any good. So that's what Torah is telling us. It's saying, it's saying don't do that. It's not, and the change is actually very interesting. There's a change in the tooth orders, right? I said the first time the guy said for a sickle and then for an axe. A sickle is a hefty farm equipment, but it can't get damaged. It can't get nicked. An axe is something that, boy, you whack trees with. It's almost never possible to have any damage. So when the guy says, I'm asking for an axe and I'm giving back a sickle, and he gets back a sickle, he's basically really holding a grudge, because he says, hey, you asked for an axe, I asked for an axe the first time, and you said no, but I will even give you a sickle. Oh, and that's a different story, So I'm being so nice, and I even give you a sickle. It's not a problem. So this is the whole hint that they're saying. That's what they're basically saying. That's what the Huskuni and the Rabbi Yosef Shorabor explain. That basically that there's something. This is not a way to live. This is not the proper way to be. And this actually connects to the first part. It says, don't hold a, don't don't hate your neighbor in your heart. What do you mean hate my neighbor in your heart? So there was a famous Hasidic rabbi. His name was the Rimanavar, and he said the following. Very interesting insight. Very, very interesting insight. He said, there's the order is not, what do you mean don't hate your neighbor in your heart? What is in your heart? That means in my heart, the way I look at the world, I think you're bad. That's what it means. I'm thinking, and this is how you should be, and I'm keeping it in my heart and my grudge and my vengeance and so forth like that, how I think you should behave, and that's what I'm hating. It's not talking about hitting him. It's talking about, I didn't do anything bad to him. I just happened to be holding this resentment in myself. And he says, that's not a way to be. In fact, well, let's look at it. There could be three separate cases here, okay? The first case is, I'm not telling, you tell people don't hold a revenge, don't hold a grudge, just it's bad. Torah says no. It doesn't always work so easily like that. I don't choose to necessarily hold resentment or hatred for somebody else. So thank you very much. You told me to not be it. And now what am I supposed to do about it? So the Rambam explains it very nicely. He says, listen, there could be a couple situations here. The first situation is maybe he really did something bad to you. Okay, all right. So you know what? That's fine. You know what you do? You take him to court. He stole something from you. He ripped you off. He hit you or something like that. Okay, now you're not supposed to say nothing. You take him to court. Do something with him. That is not the case we're talking about. We're talking about here about perhaps another case, where, but even in that case, you don't hold a grudge against the person. You just do what you have to do to get justice. Okay, I'm going to get justice. The other situation is maybe this was a close friend of yours, you know, if it's a distant person who you don't even know you, then, whatever, I don't get into their head. I don't think about what they're thinking about. But in the other hand, because I just really don't know who they are. But this is a friend. I really expected more of you, and you hurt me and so forth. So that's where the line comes, you have to give rebuke. In other words, you say, listen, this is what I'm feeling. You are my friend. And maybe they'll come back and say, you know what? I was stressed out that day. I just couldn't handle anything more. I really didn't. I just wanted my life in order that day. It was so chaotic and so forth. And I just didn't want one more thing to have to worry about and so forth, about what's happening with my lawnmower. So, I said no to you and so forth. You can ask that. You can ask that of a friend, and you should ask that. You shouldn't keep it in your heart. That's the other thing. Don't keep it in your heart. It'll explode. It's not good. If you actually do feel this, then you can say something about it, but say it in a respectful way so that there's no sin. There's no avera in the situation. So those are the two first cases. The first case is, sometimes you do have to take the person to court, and sometimes you do have to ask them, why are you refusing me? And they'll get maybe one or two answers back. Either they'll start, throwing negative things back at you, or they will actually maybe admit that they, I was off that day, and I'm sorry about it. And those are different. Those are different kinds of responses, and those are valid. But the final thing is now that you've got this resentment in yourself, how do you get rid of it? So it's not such a simple thing. But there are 5 basic processes that you do in order to be able to overcome these situations. The first one is you have to say to yourself, listen, I'm not perfect. There's things that I do to other people, and they might have caused somebody to hurt me. So just like I need sometimes some people to give forgiveness to me, I can give it to other people. Doesn't hurt that bad. It's okay. What's it going to cost me? I'll overlook it this time. That's one step. That's a good step. The second one is, when somebody says something bad to you and negative, and you're holding it inside of yourself, why? That's their issue. You have a core truth, godliness, an inner eye, and that can never be destroyed. Sticks and stones won't break my bones. I mean, it's just, or it will, but whatever. It just, I am bigger than this, and I can be beyond that. And I don't need to necessarily judge myself on what other people are saying. That's number 2. Number 3, I liked very much. He said, this is all coming from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, Bless the Women this week. He said, number 3 is you have to also realize that by holding a grudge, I'm really harming myself. I'm damaging myself a lot, probably more than the other person. Somebody once said that holding a grudge is like drinking poison and hoping that the other person dies. Because I'm feeling all this hate and anger, and I go to bed and I'm having the sleepless nights, and the other person's going to go scot-free, doesn't even realize how bad what he said to me and so forth. It's like, you're just burning your own house. You're doing, it's not doing anything to the other person, the anger and the vengeance. So you can say, you know what, I can release that. I don't necessarily need it. And number 4 has a little story with it. Number 4 is what goes around comes around. Basically, I heard this was a great story. Rabbi Jacobson said he has a brother. His name is Baruch Shalom Jacobson. Baruch Shalom Jacobson once was asked to be the rabbi officiating at a Jewish funeral. Not a religious one. It was not that, but they were traditional Jews. He gets to the funeral, and he sees there the widow. And then there's 2 groups of people, not completely separate, one standing in one area, one in another area. And he asks the widow, he says, what's going on here? So she tells him, she says, oh, those are my 2 sons. They haven't been speaking in 25 years, and they're not going to be speaking together now. They're not happy. They're so angry with each other. So Baruch Shalom, at that time, he decided in his own head, he says, I am going to make up a completely fake halacha. Out of the blue, a new thing that doesn't exist and isn't true. He goes to this widow, and this is really chutzpahdik. And this is such a wild story. He goes over to her and he says, I have a problem. She says, what's the problem? He says, I can't do the funeral. Why not? Why not? He says, because it's a Jewish custom. He says that the Jewish custom is that the children who are going to say Kaddish, they have to talk to each other, they have to hold hands, and together while holding hands, say the Kaddish. that's how Jewish funerals work. And if they don't do it, it's not a Jewish funeral. I can't officiate here. You'll probably have to get a priest to handle it. She goes, what? My husband would kill me, a priest? She goes, and he says, well, that's what I have to do. So she goes over to her two sons and says, you do this. He says, your father is going to be sitting in a coffin unburied because of you too. And they go, why? Because she says, you have to talk to each other and you have to hold hands and say Kaddish. Otherwise, it's not a Jewish funeral. So you know what they do? So they do it because the mother was a hard lady. She yells at them. They start talking. They hold their hands. Nobody died. The family was all together now, and they said the Kaddish together like that. It's sometimes it's like it takes small little sandcastles, and somebody knocked my sandcastle down, and it's like somebody knocked my whole house down. No, it's just a sandcastle. It's not such a big thing. It's not such a big issue. So that's one, and the fourth way. And the fifth way to get over it is basically like Yosef, who basically said, to his brothers, he said, I don't resent you, because God is the one who eventually sent me. That's very hard, but that's very holy. But that's very true. These are the 5 ways to deal with resentment. I'll finish off with a little cute little story that finishes it up. That also shows you what the power is of overlooking other people's, transgressions. So there's a cantor. His name is Cantor Herson. He lives in Williamsburg. Rabbi YY said he just heard the story a few days ago. Interesting story. So this guy was asked to and paid to come to a synagogue in Williamsburg in Brooklyn, and to be the chazan for a Shabbat brachas. It's Shabbos, and of course he does. He was there for that Shabbos, and he was the chazan, and they were paying him, and he was singing, and chazans like to sing, and he sang. There happened to be one guy in the audience who didn't really appreciate it, so he kept going, no, speed it up. And the Cancel person happens to be a very adel, very refined person. He didn't. He said, the guy's not paying me. He's not part of the family. I don't think I have to listen to him. He just kept going on. He didn't pay attention. And the guy kept doing it over and over again. And then eventually he went up to the bima and said, I'm replacing you. You're fired, and I'm in charge now. And the family objected and said, we paid for him. We didn't pay for you. So you just, you're not the shliach shliber. You're not sent by the community. So go sit down, which he actually did. And then he made a whole shtick, when they opened up the ark and they brought up the Torah, they said it's Parshas Para. Para means a cow. And he says, thank you very much. Our cantor is like he bellows like a cow. And all this time, the cantor just ignores it. He just says, what's the point? I'm not going to get into an argument with this guy. He's obviously got his problems and so forth. After the services was over, some guy comes over to him and says, the rabbis say in the Torah, they say wondrous things about a person and the blessings that come to him of a person who's insulted in public and overlooks all of that. And amazing blessings come to you. So I want to ask a favor of you. There's a friend of mine here in Williamsburg. He doesn't have any children. He's been trying for a long time. Will you give him a blessing? You have collected a lot of spiritual energy, and give him a blessing that he should have a child. So the Catholic person says, sure, give me the name. I take the mother's name. I take the father's name. I take their parents' names. And he gives a nice blessing for them. And he goes home. He says, a few days ago, this is the 1-year anniversary of Parshas Para. It happened 1 year ago. So he goes back to that same synagogue in Williamsburg because he gets a message. He says, hey, they're having a baby naming. They had a baby girl, and you'd like to quietly, secretly go and see, what effect your blessings were. So he goes there. And nobody's supposed to know him because, this guy was not even there that Shabbos. But the guy who had the baby comes right over to him and says, I know who you are, and I want to thank you very much for your blessing. So this is also, the power of being able to just, come to a deeper place in ourselves, to realize, not to be narrow and restricted and to think about, about tit for tat or whatever it is. But the Torah is trying to teach you, you know what? It's we can live in a bigger plane and think bigger who we are. And that's what it says. Yeah, sometimes you have to rebuke the person. Sometimes you have to ask them why they're doing this. Sometimes it has to be court, but sometimes you can just say, you know what, I just don't understand what's going on in your head today, and I don't necessarily have to confront you on it. So this is one of the very practical lessons, I thought, bringing Torah down into our day-to-day lives, and sometimes the difficult ones. And it's amazing. It's all in one line. Love your fellow Jewish yourself. It was a very interesting idea. And with that, I think I used my time up. So I'm going to be nice to my wife and let her continue this. If there's no questions.
I actually have a question.
Sure.
Is that applied to non-Jews as well?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's just because I had a really big conflict with someone in my class. They were extremely anti-Israel, and I hold a grudge against them for that. And I'm just thinking, like, I have a few graduation tickets that some people need. I mean, can I just exclude her, or I have to
No, this is not saying don't keep your borders. There are people out there who don't know their borders and have and cause damage, and we don't have to necessarily let people trample on ourselves. This is not about some sort of this is not about that kind of. I'm trying to make it a very practical, realistic class. So there are people there who hate Jews for whatever reason, and you may not understand it, or they may have they hate you personally for whatever reason and stuff like that. And you don't have to necessarily go out of your way, assess the situation, or if you need to have somebody else also look at the situation independently and ask them what they think about this and see if you have to protect yourself. So no, this is not about necessarily doing that.
But do I have to go out of my way and be kind to them, or?
Again, it's it depends on the level and depth of it. If it's your brother or your sister, yes. It's your mother, yeah. It's a fellow Jew, in your synagogue, yes. If it's just somebody who is a police officer, who's giving you the ticket, not necessarily. Or some loud person who has nothing else to do in the class but to cause problems for you and for other people, then maybe that's the person you don't have to really you don't have to be friends with everybody in the world. So that's okay.
Can't you be cordial to them though? I mean, yeah. You don't have to be friends, but you could be cordial. Wouldn't that make it better than?
It's like this cat Hasan. He saw this guy had an issue, a problem. He didn't argue with him. He didn't resent him. He didn't yell back at him and so forth. He just said, he just did what he had to do. And probably, he's probably known in that synagogue. So, yeah.
I'm actually just thinking about Molly's question, and I thought about a book that I read last year that I found was incredibly powerful. I think you're right that there are times where we don't really have to deal with people who aren't going to like us and who we need to protect ourselves from, whose toxicity, and, not needing to get involved with that. But I'm also thinking about sometimes when we do something nice and that's unexpected, we have the opportunity to educate or transform or change the energy or the dynamic around. Like, had the other guy said, yes, I'll give you my axe, just to sort of model something or change the dynamic, or to trust on faith that there was some reason he couldn't have gotten the sickle. And I guess I'm thinking about a very powerful book. I'm forgetting the name of it, but the heir apparent and son of the KKK, Derek Black. Mm-hmm. Fabulous book. But he goes to college after serving in some political office in Florida, and because of a couple of Orthodox Jews and a Latino guy, they were the only people on campus after he was exposed who would talk with him, and they just said, "Let him get to know us, let him get to know our stories, and let us get to know him." And eventually, this guy changes his mind, and he leaves the KKK, exposes it, and writes this book with Eli. Sazak, is that his name? And then really tries to get his whole entire family. Then entire movement to see. And that's only because everybody wrote him off and was horrible to him, which probably reaffirmed his feelings. And then
Right.
these couple of guys said, come to Shabbat dinner. They're the one. And I just thought to myself, like, that's an interesting tack, that instead of, assuming the worst, they said, and even the people at the college, they had the opportunity to, Rising Out of Hatred was the name of the book, by Eli Sazo. They had the opportunity to say he can't go here, but they say he's been nothing but respectful. Maybe in 4 years we can turn him. And that's exactly what happened. That as long as he was behaving himself. So I feel like there's a way in which, like with this guy who's anti-Israel, like I think about the organization Stand With Us, which teaches people conflict resolution, how to talk to the BDS in high schools and on college campuses. And they're actively saying, we want to train you to know how to deal with conflict resolution and how to talk to people, because maybe you have a chance to make an impact and to also like get the truth out there. So I don't know. I think it's a very, very dicey thing. And sometimes you don't know whether it's the right thing or not, but like an incredible thing can happen if you don't give in to that kind of perceptual bias that we have internally. I don't know if that's helpful, to the person.
Oh, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for adding that. Yeah, that was great. That was absolutely great. Thank you. Want to do this?
Yeah. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, that's what I always learned, is just to be cordial.
I would like to add to Amy's point that you have to know that you're up for such a thing. Not everybody is up. Hi, Hadassah. Thanks for turning on your camera. Not everybody is up to such a thing. You have to know your own. What's over here? Some dinner. You have to know your own. You have to know your own. If that's you have to know if you're up to it. Probably the people who invited him for Shabbos dinner were quite, they were at that stage in life where they could actually do that. So I would say don't bite off more than you can chew. And
but that's why I said, by just being cordial, you're not exacerbating anything.
Yeah.
And you're making them feel like a human being, but not becoming friendly with them. You're just being cordial. That's all you're doing, So that was advice that I was once given.
Yes.
And it's worked.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have something to say they'd like to add? That was very nice. I liked what everybody said. Yeah. Thank you. I already wrote it down. I want to look at it. I already, as when Haskell was speaking and you said that, I wrote it down right away. So, okay. I'm going to speak exactly about what Haskell Shimon was saying. And first, I want to start out with a little prelude that there are 4 things that I mentioned before every class. Number 1, we're in an extraordinary time, and it's the truth. And we're in an extraordinary time. And why is it extraordinary? Because Lubavitcher Rebbe told us, and he was never wrong about any public pronouncement, that the time of the redemption is unfolding. And we know that our souls were handpicked to be in this time. We know that we have the tools that we need, the mitzvahs, and we have the leadership that we need. We have directions, tremendous directions from the Rebbe. From the Rebbe alone, we have tremendous guidelines, and from all our Jewish tradition, we have tremendous guidelines about what to do in this time, and what we're doing tonight actively furthers the process of redemption. So, I have something that happened to me, and I have a little story. So my point is exactly like what Shimon was talking about. Don't define other Jews by their flaws. Hashem doesn't do it. Hashem sees a gem, and we shouldn't do it either. We should not define another Jew by their flaw. So, funny thing happened to me this Pesach. I have something that I've tried to get rid of for a long time. And remember, I told you that on Seder night, it's a powerful opportunity. There's like an open window and you can jump through to freedom. Pesach is all about freedom. So on Seder night, probably both Seder nights, I asked Hashem for help with a particular thing that I've not been able to let go of. And I didn't see any progress. I asked and I didn't see progress, but I underestimated Hashem. And you have to give Hashem a little bit of slack, at least a couple weeks to help you. And so I'll tell you, I have something that is sort of like an ugly flaw. And I'll tell you, this is it. There's somebody that I've been dealing with extensively for a very, very long time. And this person drives me crazy because this person is ruining their life. This person constantly ruins their own life, ruins their emotional health, and ruins their physical health. And I deal with this person a tremendous amount. And in the beginning, I would give all, not in the beginning, I continue. I spend so much effort on this person, and I because I hate to see what they're doing to themselves. I just can't take it. And because I deal with them so much, and because I see them so much. And when you have poured your heart and soul into something again and again and again, it's very frustrating when the person keeps doing the things to themselves that they that are just so self-destructive. So so after a while, did you ever hear that in parenting, for example, in parenting, a parent often has the least patience for who? Anybody know? Who do they have? Which child do they have the least patience for? Anybody know? Yeah, Amy?
Would you say it's the one that resembles them?
Exactly. The one who has, especially the one who has flaws that they have. It could be tiny in the parent and big in the kid, but this flaw drives you crazy because you have it. So I've noticed over the years that to us, there's a faint resemblance in me. It bothers me in me. I don't have it. Thank God I don't do things to the, like that person does. But anyway, there are things that bother me about myself. And so and after many, many years, I've told myself, Shlomo Yehudis, it doesn't help. Just sip your lips. Just don't give advice. Stop the advice. Stop everything. But it's because I deal with this person again and again. Again, I have to listen to what they're doing to themselves. It's just, what are you doing? It's so simple. Open your eyes. So anyway, this Pesach, I asked Hashem for help to just drop it, drop the advice, drop the lecturing, drop it. And I want you to know that I've been working on this for years. Whenever I have to deal with this person, I have signs on my refrigerator, signs here, signs. Just don't open your mouth. Don't say anything. It's not going to get you anywhere. It's going to hurt you when nothing is done. Don't do it. So anyway, as I said, I didn't see any magic bullet from Hashem. And I noticed something very strange that started to happen on Pesach. This is the only thing I saw. I saw that I was extremely emotional. I was extremely emotional about everything. If I told a story, oh my gosh, I was a waterworks. I was very happy all Pesach. But my soul was extremely close to the surface. I went to a Shiva call of a stranger and I was like, whoa! I cried a lot. And I know from the little psychology that I know that if a person cries often, it means it's a sign that they could be depressed. But I had no signs of being depressed. I was happy. I was making jokes. I didn't have bad thoughts. And I was being my normal self, which is like I dance in the middle of the day. I just do silly little jigs. I make jokes, and I'm a very silly person at home. I'm extremely silly, and I was my normal self. So I was thinking, why am I crying? I'm clearly not depressed. What's going on here? Why is my soul on the surface? Particularly the last day of Pesach. The last day of Pesach is the highest of all the days, right? Then after Pesach came my mother's yahrzeit, my mother's 18th yahrzeit. The last day of Pesach, I had total insomnia, total. And I didn't know why. Nothing was bothering me. I had total insomnia. On my mother's yahrzeit, I had very dramatic insomnia again, and nothing was bothering me. And I didn't know what it was. And I finally came to the conclusion, Shlomo Yehudis, your own failings are depressing you. It not in an active way that, your thoughts are running away or anything like that. But obviously there's something laying on your heart. So anyway, after the second sleepless night, my mother's yard site, I woke up in the morning and I had been thinking about this flaw, like lecturing this person, giving them constant advice and stuff like that. I'd been thinking about it a lot, how I definitely want to drop it, but I never had that. I just didn't have success because the person drives me crazy when I see them destroying themselves, and the person constantly talks to me about it. So it's just like very hard to zip my lips. So the morning of my mother's yard site, I woke up and I decided, it is that trait. That's you. It is depressing you. It is laying on your heart. And so I decided, you know what? And I was thinking already that I'm a terrible, for a couple of weeks already, I was thinking I'm a terrible person because I have this, I keep lecturing them, and why don't I just leave them alone, for goodness sake? And so I decided, Shalom Sihudas, I don't know what's going to be. I'm going to continue to try my hardest, but I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to forgive you for having this flaw. It is an ugly flaw. It's an awful flaw, but I'm going to forgive you, and I'm going to move on. And guess what? Today I had no sleep, barely. The second time I had 2 and 3/4 hours of sleep before going to work in the morning. And I said, you know what? I don't care about the lack of sleep, and I don't care about the flaw. I'm going to forgive you, and I'm going to be happy. There's just no way about it. I'm not going to be happy. I'm going to be happy. And Hashem will just have to help me. And later that day, when I came back from work, my mother's candle was still burning, her yahrzeit candle. And I had this idea in my head, and I decided I want to introduce my mother to my current life. And I imagined, I did it. I didn't just imagine it. I imagined introducing my mother to all my, the main players a lot of the main players in my life that she never got a chance to meet. And when so, I opened my mouth and I said a name, and the most delicious description came out when I was describing her to my mother. And then this person's name came up, and the most delicious description came out when I introduced this person to my mother, virtually introduced this person to my mother. And my dynamic with that person changed after that. It all of a sudden it dawned on me, just like normally we don't define ourselves by our flaw. It's human nature that a person does not define themselves by their flaw. It's human nature that we forgive ourselves for our flaws and we define ourselves by other things. It's just normal. But since Pesach, since I dove into Hashem that he should help me get rid of this thing, I was obsessed by it. And I started defining myself by this flaw. People think you're so nice. I know better. And I started defining myself by that flaw. But the morning of my mother's yahrzeit, I woke up and I decided I cannot define myself this way. I just can't. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to forgive myself and move on. And that gave me the power to let go of this person's flaw and to define her the way I defined her to my mother. And I realized that that's exactly what we're supposed to do. Just like what Yaskel Shimon was saying, don't define another Jew by their flaw. Hashem doesn't. Hashem sees a gem. And my relations with this person are much easier now. It's like a rock fell off of me. So, and it's not a coincidence that my 2 nights of sleeplessness were extraordinarily holy days. My neshama was saying, enough, we're getting rid of this flaw, and I'm going to show you how. I'm going to make your own flaw unbearable for yourself. And then you're going to have to forgive yourself. And when you forgive yourself, you're going to forgive this person for being imperfect as well. So I felt incredibly lighter ever since then. I just felt like I was a different person, completely lighter. And it's exactly what it's exactly what Yaskel Shimon was saying, that what another person does with their mind is none of our business. We can help them, what they do with their mind, what they're thinking, it's just none of our business. It's not my territory. It's not my territory to judge another Jew. It's just not my territory. Let me just live on a practical level. So I'm going to tell a very short story about a true story about the power of living lightly, living with good expectations, living with joy. True story. I heard this from my when I listened to this Hasidic lady that I often listen to, Mindy Feldman from Muncie, and there was, in Eretz Israel, they live nice lives, but they really have very little money compared to what we have. It's a their financial situation is much more strained than ours, and it's much more common for people to have strained income. And I think I once told you that when I had a master's degree in journalism, I graduated with a master's degree. All my friends graduated with higher degrees also. I picked the poorest profession. And my friend who graduated from journalism school, not journalism, who graduated from law school, immediately made 4 times the amount that I did on graduation. Even though I had flying honors and all this stuff, doesn't matter. Journalism was, and I think it is again. It's a at least in some levels, it's a poor profession. So my uncle in Israel, at the same time, when I graduated from graduate school, he was an extremely prominent doctor, the head of his department in Israel, and he was asked to fly around the world to lecture about his specialty. And he was actually, later in life, he became Israel's Doctor of the Year. He was making the exact same salary that I was making right out of journalism school. I mean, it's just, in Israel, the salaries are much, much less than they are here. So anyway, right before Passover, Pesach is an expensive holiday. People have guests. You have to serve, and matzah this year hit, the matzah that we buy hit $35 a box. We bought 20 boxes. We bought $700 worth of matzah, and we went through it. $700 worth of matzah, and so it's an expensive holiday, and before the holiday in Israel, this rabbi who lived with his family in Israel, he was the rabbi of a shul, didn't make a lot of money. A person he's close to came to him with a gift. Came to him with a gift card of 600 shekels, and 600 shekels is about $170, and about $175, something like that. So anyway, he came home. He was so thrilled. He was like, "Oh, wow!" He came home. He said, "Listen, my dear family, we never celebrate Pesach the way I would like to. I got a 600 shekel gift card, and I'm splitting it between mommy and the kids. Mommy, you, the mother, you have always wanted a food processor for Pesach. You're going to have 300 shekels, and you can buy a food processor. 300 shekels is about $88. And the kids, you're going to have 300 shekels to divide between you, and you can each get a present for Pesach. You can each get a toy." Everybody was so happy. They were incredibly happy. They never had stuff like this. And he said, "I want to show you the gift card." And he went to look for the gift card, and it was nowhere. It was absolutely nowhere. He had just gotten it, and it was nowhere in his belongings. He had obviously dropped it, lost it. It didn't have a name on it. It was just a gift card. And, like money, like dropping money. So gone are all the dreams. And he said to his kids, "You know what? If I lost it, it's because Hashem wanted me to lose it. And who knows? Maybe this saved us from a terrible injury on Pesach. Maybe Hashem, we were fated to have a terrible injury, and instead this loss came to us. Or who knows what this saved us from? But if it's from Hashem that I lost it, obviously it's good. And I think we should dance with happiness that I lost it, because obviously it's something very good." So he and the whole family danced and sang because they were so happy that this happened to him, because obviously if it came from Hashem, it's good. It's like wildly good. And so that's what they did. They danced and they sang to Hashem, and they were all very happy. A while later, he goes to his shul. Maybe a couple of days later, I don't know how much later, and he sees a member of his shul, a guy who is in his, an older single, and this older single looks like he has a ton on his head. He looks like he's like depressed. He's like clearly in bad shape. And the rabbi goes over to him and he says, "What's happening? What's wrong? I see that something's bothering you." And the guy said, Rabbi, I've been single for so many years, and I found somebody. I actually found somebody, and we got engaged, and and we made our plans and everything. I was so happy after so many years to find somebody who I can go through life with, and we sent out the invitations, and the wedding is very shortly from now. And she texted me a few days ago that it's off. She texted me. She said it's off. She's not interested anymore. It's off. He said, "My life is ruined. It took me so long to find her. What am I going to do? My life is ruined." And the rabbi said, "Listen, if this came from Hashem, everything that happens comes from Hashem. And if this is from Hashem, it's very good. It's not just good, it's very good. We can't see it. We don't know how it's good, but this is very good. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you how my family reacted to the loss of a gift card. We danced and we sang." And he told him the whole story. And he said, "I suggest that we get up and dance and sing that Hashem did this to you. Because if Hashem did this to you, it's good. And if you treat it as good, good will come out of it." And so they did. They got up and they danced and they sang that his engagement was over. His engagement was broken, finished. And a few days later, he saw the guy, and the guy is in seventh heaven. And the rabbi said, "What happened?" He said, "I'll tell you." He said, "After I danced and sang, like the next day or something, I don't know if it was the next day or 2 days later," he said, the guy got a call from his erstwhile bride-to-be, the one who used to be his bride-to-be. She had texted him. It's such a cool thing to do, to text somebody, that this is over, right? Something that they invested so much in. So a few days later, he got a call after the singing and dancing. And she said, "Hi, how are you?" And he said, "I'm wonderful." And she said, "Yeah?" He said, "Yeah, I'm wonderful." And she said, "You're wonderful?" He said, "Yes, I'm wonderful." And he didn't say it in a nasty way. He just said, "I'm wonderful." And she said, "Can I tell you something?" She said, "I broke off the engagement. I texted you because I heard from somebody that you might have a temper." And she said, "I knew that that's something I cannot handle. That's one thing I cannot handle." She said, "But then I sent the text and I expected you to come to my house, scream at me, bang down my door, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. There was no angry reaction at all. And now I call you and you say you're wonderful." She said, "I would like to rethink this. Can we go on with it? Can we just pick up where we left off?" So they picked up where they left off, and they got married, and Baruch Hashem, it worked out. So that's a perfect reaction to negativity happening in your life. Remember, I told you one of my favorite little stories is people who are schooled in doing this. There was a family, usually the mother starts, and when the mother starts with such reactions to bad things, then the kids, and the mother doesn't tell anybody to do it. The kids pick up on their own, and eventually the husband picks up. And one of my favorite stories is that one time in a Hasidic house where the mother did this and the kids were picking up on it. I told you the story a long, long time ago that a 4-year-old, was walking around with a Sefer Torah that he had made out of Legos. Torah scroll he'd made out of Legos, and he would dancing and singing to Hashem. And then, what happens to Legos? They fall apart. And he looks down, he says, Yasha Koch, Avishter, you did this. Yasha Koch means congratulations, Hashem, you did this. And he goes and he builds it again and he dances around. And after a while, it falls apart. He says, Yasha Koach, Avishter, good stuff, Avishter, good stuff, God. You're interesting. And I know it's good. And his older brother started to make fun of him. And the mother said, are you insane? Had we been like this when we were little, can you imagine what we would be today? So anyway, that's the end of my stories. And I'm going to close the recording. And if anybody has any questions, I would love to